The day began just like any other family gathering, but something felt off. I remember it was Lily's birthday, a small, sweet celebration in our backyard. She had just turned 5. There were balloons, a cake adorned with those ridiculous, bright candles she adored, and Oliver, our 7-year-old, was running around like he'd had too much sugar. The sun was shining, and everything should have been perfect, but it wasn't. Emma, my wife, seemed distant. You know that gut feeling you get when something feels wrong, but you can't pinpoint why. That was me. All day, I felt an unsettling sense of discomfort, like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, but unsure if I was about to fall or if I was imagining the danger. Emma was talking to Dave, a colleague from her marketing job. Emma's always had plenty of male friends, and jealousy had never been an issue for me. But that day, at Lily's party, I noticed something hard to ignore. Dave wasn't just chatting, they were exchanging glances, the kind that say more than words ever could. It was subtle, but I picked up on it. I always do. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just laughing at some work-related joke. Maybe they were just close colleagues. But something about her body language when he approached made my stomach twist. I couldn't stop observing them throughout the day. Emma was smiling, but it wasn't her usual smile. It felt too personal, too intimate, and worst of all, Dave leaned in just a bit too close, his eyes lingering on her lips when she spoke. I kept wondering, am I being paranoid? After the guests left and the kids were in bed, I sat down with a beer, trying to shake it off, but my mind wouldn't let it go. Without thinking, I grabbed her phone. I'd never been the type to check her messages. I used to trust her completely. At least I did until I saw it. A message from Dave last night was fun. We should do it again soon, followed by a winking face. My heart stopped. You know that feeling when your chest tightens and for a moment you hope you misunderstood? That was me. I must have stared at that message for a full minute before anger started to boil inside me. I stormed into the kitchen where Emma was acting like everything was fine, as if she hadn't just destroyed everything between us. Who the hell is Dave? I asked, holding up her phone. My voice came out harsher than I expected. Emma's face turned pale for a split second before she regained her usual cold composure. What the hell, James? You're going through my phone now? She tried to play it off, making me out to be the irrational one, like she always did when we fought. It's nothing. You're being paranoid. Dave and I are just friends. I can't believe you're doing this, especially at Lily's birthday. I wasn't buying it. Not this time. Friends don't send texts like that. What the hell does last night was fun mean? Emma, I demanded. We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension so thick it could have been cut with a knife. I couldn't believe she was turning this around on me, as if I was the bad guy for finding out. My mind raced, thinking about every late-night work event, every unexplained dinner, and every time she brushed me off when I asked about her day. You're imagining things, James. Stop being so insecure, she snapped, but her eyes betrayed her. There was something there, guilt or fear, maybe. I knew I needed to talk to someone. The whole situation was eating me alive, and I didn't know what to believe anymore. That's when I called Sarah. Sarah and I go way back. We've been friends since childhood, long before Emma came into my life. She knows me better than anyone, and I figured she'd understand. I didn't tell her everything over the phone, just that I needed to talk. She was at my place within the hour. It felt strange at first, spilling everything to her, but she listened like she always had. When I told her about Dave's text, she didn't even flinch. Instead, she gave me a look like she knew something I didn't. James, she said, leaning in, I've seen this before. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Her words hit hard. I wasn't crazy. Emma was hiding something, and I wasn't going to let her convince me otherwise. Sarah offered to help me get to the bottom of it. She suggested we keep an eye on Emma and find out what she was up to when she wasn't at home. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but by that point, what did I have to lose? Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, and I needed answers. Sarah and I wasted no time. After that conversation, I felt like I was hanging on by a thread. I needed proof that the gnawing feeling inside me wasn't just paranoia. Sarah, always practical, suggested we follow Emma carefully. We had to be smart about it. Emma wasn't stupid, and the last thing I needed was her catching us. She was already trying to paint me as paranoid, and I didn't want to give her more ammunition. So there we were, 2 grown adults parked across the street from Emma's office one night. Sarah sat beside me, watching the entrance like a hawk. It felt surreal, like a scene from a low-budget spy movie, but this was my life now. An hour passed, then another. Just as I was about to call it a night, Emma finally appeared. She wasn't alone. Dave was with her, and as soon as I saw them together, my heart sank. They walked side by side, talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was as if I didn't exist. "Follow them," Sarah whispered, her voice low, as if we were about to catch them in a high-stakes crime. I didn't argue. We tailed them at a safe distance, trying not to draw attention. They ended up at a small, upscale restaurant, the kind with mood lighting, candles on every table, and oversized wine glasses. It was intimate. Too intimate. I watched from the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Inside, Dave pulled out a chair for her, and Emma smiled the same smile that once belonged to me, the one she gave me when we first started dating, when I thought we were untouchable. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and watch any longer. I glanced over at Sarah, who had been watching everything unfold as though she had witnessed it 100 times before. "How did we end up here?" I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with the anger I was struggling to keep in check. Sarah didn't say much, but I could feel her empathy. She had been through something similar before, so she didn't need to explain it. The betrayal, the lies, the slow destruction of everything you thought was solid. This wasn't new to her. We sat in silence for what seemed like an eternity, watching them order food, drink wine, and laugh as if they were on some romantic date. I had never felt such raw anger before, the kind that burns deep in your chest and claws its way out. "I can't do this anymore," I finally said, breaking the silence. Sarah nodded, though there was a trace of hesitation in her eyes. "Are you sure? You need to be ready for whatever she might say." I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I knew I couldn't continue like this, living in the shadows of my own marriage, watching my wife lead a double life. We waited until they left, Emma and Dave walking out together as if nothing in the world could harm them. It made me sick. By the time I got home, I was fuming, barely able to think clearly. Emma was already there, lounging on the couch like she hadn't just spent the evening with another man. The casualness of it infuriated me the most. Like this had become her new normal, as though I no longer mattered in her life. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, not even trying to hide the sharpness in my tone. Emma looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Out with friends." Why the interrogation? The anger bubbled up again, but this time I wasn't going to let her twist the situation. "Cut the crap, Emma. I followed you. I saw you with Dave." Her expression shifted instantly, and there it was again, that flicker of guilt. But instead of admitting the truth, she doubled down, just as I had expected. "You followed me? Seriously, James, do you even hear yourself? That's insane. You've lost it." I refused to back down. "I saw you with him, Emma, at that restaurant. You can't keep lying to me." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your heart pound because you know what's coming will change everything. She stood up slowly, crossing her arms defensively. "Fine," she finally said, her voice cold and distant. "Yes, I've been spending time with Dave. But it's not what you think. We're not. It's just, I've been lonely, James. You've been so wrapped up in work, the kids, everything but me. It was just emotional. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emotional affair, she said it, as though that somehow made it less of a betrayal, as if it didn't matter because it wasn't physical. But to me, it didn't matter. Whether it was emotional or physical, she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "A fling? You're telling me this was just a fling?" I spat, my voice rising in anger. "We never slept together," she shot back, as if that was supposed to make everything okay. "It was just... I don't know. I was confused. I'm sorry." But her apology was empty. There was no real regret in her voice. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, she was sorry she got caught. The argument dragged on for what felt like hours, with accusations flying back and forth. I called her every name I could think of, and she threw her own insults back at me, accusing me of neglecting her, of not being the husband she needed. It was toxic, brutal. By the time it was over, I felt hollow inside. That night, I crashed on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind racing, and in the middle of all that chaos, there was Sarah. She stayed with me, even though I hadn't asked her to. We talked for hours after Emma had stormed off to bed. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, staring up at the ceiling. "It feels like my whole life is falling apart." Sarah nodded, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "I've been there, James. It's not easy, but you'll get through this." We talked about the past, about the memories we had before life got so complicated. Sarah opened up about her own failed relationship, how she had been hurt, and how she understood the pain I was feeling. And as we talked, there was this tension between us, this unspoken thing that neither of us wanted to acknowledge, but it was there, lingering. After the blowout with Emma, things got too quiet between us. We were still living under the same roof, going through the motions for the kids, but it felt like a ticking time bomb. Every conversation was a minefield, every glance loaded with resentment. I knew Emma was still seeing Dave, and she knew I knew, but neither of us was ready to take that first step to end it. Not yet. That's when Sarah came up with the idea. We were sitting in a cafe, one of those places where nobody really knows you and the coffee tastes burnt. I was venting about the latest fight with Emma, another screaming match about trust, or the lack of it. "You can't keep letting her walk all over you, James," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. "She's getting away with it, and she knows it. If you don't do something soon, this is going to eat you alive," I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "But what am I supposed to do? She's already checked out. I might as well be a ghost in my own house." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face, and for a moment I wasn't sure if she was joking or serious. "Make her jealous," she said, leaning in closer. "Show her you can move on too," I stared at her. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" "I'm not the one running around with a colleague, that's where I come in," Sarah replied, her voice low and mischievous. "We'll stage it something public, somewhere she can't avoid seeing us together. It'll drive her mad." At first I thought she was kidding, but the more I considered it, the more the idea started to appeal to me. Emma had deceived me, and I was tired of feeling helpless. I wanted her to experience the same pain I was feeling, to understand what it's like to lose something you believed was securely yours. For the next hour, Sarah and I went over the details. There was a charity gala coming up in a few weeks, an event Emma had been talking about for months. It was one of those high-class affairs where everyone showed up looking perfect, pretending their lives were flawless. Emma and I were both expected to attend and put on the facade of a happy couple. "That's where we'll do it," Sarah said, her eyes lighting up as the plan took shape. "We'll make sure she sees us together flirting, laughing, let her watch. It'll drive her crazy. It was a gamble, and I knew it, but at this point, what did I have to lose?" The night of the gala arrived faster than I had anticipated. Emma was in full preparation mode, trying on dresses and making sure everything was just right. She barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words were curt, like she was fulfilling an obligation. I played along, pretending to care about the event as much as she did, but my mind was focused on what was going to unfold that night. Sarah and I had coordinated everything down to the smallest detail. We arrived separately, but not too far apart. The venue was one of those grand ballrooms with chandeliers hanging overhead, filled with couples in tuxedos and gowns sipping champagne. It was the kind of place where people came to see and be seen. I spotted Emma almost immediately. She wore a sleek black dress, her hair styled in the way she always did when she wanted to make a statement. And then I saw Dave standing beside her, looking as smug as ever. Just seeing him there made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. Sarah appeared by my side, stunning in a deep red dress that hugged her in all the right places. She gave me a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming as if to say, "Let's do this." We moved through the crowd, stopping to chat with people here and there, but always making sure we stayed close enough for Emma to notice us. And she did. I saw her glance our way, her eyes narrowing slightly as Sarah and I laughed, just a bit too loudly, our bodies a little too close. I made sure to keep my hand on Sarah's back as we navigated the room, the same way I used to with Emma. It didn't take long for her to catch on. I saw her look at me from across the room, her smile faltering momentarily before she turned back to her conversation with Dave. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. As the evening progressed, I made things more obvious. Sarah and I danced together, her body pressed against mine, and I could feel the tension in the air. Emma watched from the sidelines, her expression tightening with every passing minute. It was working. By the end of the night, the cracks in Emma's composure were clear. She tried to act like she didn't care, but I knew her better than that. When she finally couldn't take it anymore, she stormed out of the ballroom, leaving Dave standing there, looking confused. But the real twist came after the gala. Sarah and I found ourselves outside in the parking lot, away from the curious eyes of the partygoers. We were both riding high on the adrenaline from the evening, from how perfectly we had played our roles. "I think it worked," I said, my voice low as a grin spread across my face. Sarah chuckled softly. Oh, she was furious. Did you see her face when we were dancing? We stood there in the cool night air, and suddenly the tension that had been building between us for weeks came to a head. Without thinking, I pulled Sarah closer, our lips crashing together in a heated kiss that felt like the release of everything we had been holding back. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were in the back seat of my car, tangled in a passionate frenzy. It was messy, raw, and exactly what I needed at that moment, a release from all the anger, betrayal, and confusion. For that brief moment, nothing else mattered but the two of us. When it was over, we lay there, breathing heavily, the car windows fogged from the intensity of the moment. I didn't know what to say. I felt exhilarated, like I had finally taken control of my life again. But at the same time, there was a gnawing guilt deep inside. This had gone beyond just revenge. Things had gotten complicated. I didn't plan for this to happen, I said, breaking the silence. Sarah turned to me, a small smile playing on her lips. Neither did I, but nothing ever goes according to plan, does it? She was right. Nothing was going as planned anymore. I hadn't expected Emma to react so quickly, but I should have known better. The morning after the gala, I could feel the tension before Emma even spoke. She was in the kitchen, staring into her coffee, like it held the answers to whatever was churning in her mind. I knew it was coming. She had seen enough the previous night to push her over the edge, but this time I was ready. "Do you have something to tell me, James?" she asked, her voice eerily calm, too calm. I took a sip of my own coffee, pretending not to notice the storm brewing behind her eyes. "What do you mean?" She slammed her mug down on the counter, the sound sharp in the stillness of the house. "Don't play dumb with me. I saw you with her last night. You think I didn't notice you flirting with Sarah in front of everyone?" I put my cup down slowly, my pulse quickening. I knew where this was headed, and frankly I was done with her games. So what if I was? What about you and Dave? You think I don't know what's been going on between you two? That hit the mark. Her eyes widened, and for a brief second she looked caught off guard. But Emma was always quick to recover. "Don't you dare turn this around on me," she spat. "You've been acting like a complete jerk lately, sneaking around God knows where, and now at the gala you're all over Sarah like you don't care who sees." I could feel the anger rising in me again, but this time I didn't hold back. I wasn't going to let her paint me as the bad guy in this. "I followed you, Emma. I saw you with Dave at that restaurant, laughing, touching like I didn't even exist. You've been having an affair. Don't try to act like the victim here." Her face turned pale. The color drained from her face, and for once she didn't have a quick response. She didn't try to twist my words or deflect. She just stood there, breathing heavily, as if I had knocked the wind out of her. "It's different," she finally said, her voice quiet but laced with anger. "Dave and it wasn't like that." "Don't lie to me," I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around for weeks, and now I'm the villain because I danced with Sarah? You've been cheating on me. Emma, don't you understand that?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or just another one of her manipulation tactics. Emma had always known how to play the victim when it suited her, but this time I wasn't falling for it. "I made a mistake," she whispered, but before she could finish, I cut her off. "I don't care if you slept with him or not. You betrayed me. You've been lying to me, and I'm done." Emma looked like she was on the verge of breaking down, but I felt no pity anymore. I had given her every chance to be honest, and instead she tried to convince me I was the crazy one. This time, I wasn't going to let her twist things around. The damage was already done. After that argument, things at home quickly spiraled from bad to worse. It wasn't long before Oliver and Lily picked up on the tension. Kids are sharp like that, no matter how much you try to shield them from the truth. One night, after yet another fight, quieter this time, but just as brutal, I walked out into the hallway and saw Oliver standing there, his wide eyes darting between me and Emma. He didn't say a word, just stared at us like he was trying to understand what was happening. "Dad," he asked in a small, hesitant voice, "why are you and Mum always fighting?" I froze, my heart breaking as I looked at him, confused and scared. Behind him, Lily stood clutching her stuffed bunny, just as bewildered. I tried to smile, hoping to reassure them, but it felt hollow. "It's okay, Ollie. Sometimes grown-ups argue, but everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. It was far from fine, and I hated that they were getting caught in the middle of it. Emma was already gone, disappearing upstairs without saying a word, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. I knelt down, pulling both Oliver and Lily into a hug. "I'm sorry, guys. I promise I'll figure this out." But what was I going to figure out? I couldn't even stand to be in the same room as Emma, let alone pretend everything was okay. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure what I even wanted anymore. The only thing keeping me grounded in the chaos was Sarah. Our affair hadn't ended after that night in the car. In fact, it had only intensified. We met whenever we could, secret dinners, stolen moments, always careful not to leave any trace. But as much as I tried to lose myself in the excitement, the guilt was eating away at me. I was betraying my family every time I looked at Oliver or Lily. The weight of what I was doing crushed me a little more each day. They didn't deserve this, none of it. But every time I tried to break things off with Sarah, I couldn't. It was like I needed her, needed the escape she provided from the nightmare my life had become. One night, as we lay tangled together in bed, the guilt finally spilled out. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I admitted, staring up at the ceiling. I feel like I'm losing everything. Sarah turned to face me, her expression soft but serious. You're not losing anything, James. You're gaining your freedom. Emma's been dragging you down for years, and you deserve to be happy. Her words were comforting, but they didn't ease the ache in my chest. But what about Oliver and Lily? I'm ruining everything for them. You're not, Sarah said, resting her hand on my chest. You're doing what you have to do. Kids are resilient. They'll understand someday. I wanted to believe her, to convince myself that what we were doing wasn't selfish, that I was just taking control of my life. But deep down I knew it wasn't that simple. I was playing with fire, and sooner or later, everything was going to go up in flames. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. Dave was still a looming presence in my life, like a dark cloud hanging over everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that the only way I'd get any closure was to confront him directly. I needed to see the man who had wrecked my marriage face to face and expose him for what he was. I wasn't sure if I was doing it for myself, for Emma, or out of some misguided sense of justice. But I knew it had to be done. It wasn't hard to track him down. Social media made it easy. I messaged him, asking to meet. He probably thought I wanted to talk about work or some project Emma had mentioned, but I had other plans. We met at a park, the kind with kids running around and parents pushing strollers, the smell of fresh-cut grass filling the air. It was the last place anyone would expect a confrontation, which was exactly why I chose it. I wanted witnesses. I wanted him to squirm under the public gaze. I spotted him before he saw me. Dave stood by the fountain, looking around like he was waiting for an old friend. His arrogance oozed from him, even in casual clothes, and it made my skin crawl. As I approached, his smile faltered when he saw me. James, he said, trying to sound casual. Didn't expect to see you here. What's this about? I didn't bother with pleasantries. You know damn well what this is about, I said, my voice low but firm. You've been screwing my wife. His face went pale, and for a brief moment I saw panic flicker in his eyes. He quickly tried to recover, pasting on his usual smug grin. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I snapped, stepping closer. I've seen the messages. I've seen the way you look at her. Don't insult me by pretending you're innocent by now. People were starting to notice. A few joggers slowed down, and some parents cast curious glances our way, probably wondering what was going on. But I didn't care. Let them see. Let them hear every word. Look, Dave said, raising his hands defensively. Nothing happened. Emma and we were just talking. She was unhappy, and we. I don't want to hear your excuses, I growled, cutting him off. I know what happened. I'm here because I want you to look me in the eye and admit it. Admit what you did. His eyes darted around, searching for a way out, but there was none. Not here. Not in front of everyone. Fine, he muttered, barely audible. I messed up. We had something, but it wasn't. It wasn't serious. His words made my blood boil. He said it like it was nothing, like my entire marriage was just a casual fling. He tried to brush it off with not serious, but I repeated his words, my voice trembling with anger. You think you can just walk away and act like none of this matters? You've ruined everything by now. People had started gathering, watching the confrontation unfold. Dave's face had turned red, and for the first time I saw fear in him. He wasn't the confident guy I'd imagined. He was just a coward who had been caught. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You didn't mean for it, I shouted, my fists clenched. Well, it did. And now you're going to deal with the consequences. Before I could say more, I saw her Emma standing at the edge of the park, her face pale and eyes wide with shock. She must have known something was happening and came to stop it, but it was too late. The ride home was silent, filled with all the unsaid words that were raging in our minds. When we got inside, Emma collapsed on the couch, her hands trembling. I stood there, waiting for her to break down, and it didn't take long. She started sobbing deep, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I wanted to feel something: anger, satisfaction, anything, but all I felt was exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice barely audible through the tears. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I just stared at her. Then why, I finally asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Why did you do it?" Emma buried her face in her hands, her words spilling out between sobs. "I don't know. I was lonely. It felt like you didn't see me anymore. You were always busy with work, with the kids. I just felt invisible. And then Dave came along, and he made me feel wanted. I know that's no excuse, but I was lost." Her confession hit me harder than I thought it would. I had braced myself for more anger, another fight, but this was different. She wasn't fighting anymore, she was broken. And despite everything, a part of me wanted to comfort her, to say that I understood. But I couldn't. "You think I wasn't lonely?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You think I didn't feel the same way? But I didn't run off to someone else. I stayed. I tried." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know I messed up, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, James, don't leave. I can't do this without you." Her plea hit me like a punch to the gut. She was asking for something I wasn't sure I could give: forgiveness. A second chance. After all of this? The final confrontation came later that night, after the kids were in bed and the house was eerily quiet. We stood in the living room, facing each other, and it felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on us. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm done, Emma. I'm done with everything." She stared at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "You don't mean that?" "I do," I said, more firmly this time. "We've been falling apart for years. Maybe the affair was just the last push, but we were broken long before Dave came into the picture. I don't know when it happened, but it did, and I can't pretend anymore." Emma collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, James, I'll do anything. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's over. I'm not doing this for me or for you. I'm doing it for the kids. They deserve better than this. Better than us." She was shattered, completely broken, but I couldn't help her. Not this time. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding as I reached the door. And there was Sarah, standing outside, watching from a distance. She didn't say anything, but her presence was enough. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing: this chapter of my life was over. The house felt unsettlingly quiet after Emma left. The finality of it washed over me in waves. That first night alone was the hardest. Every corner of the house whispered memories of our life together, both the good and the bad. But those memories no longer carried the same weight. They felt distant, like echoes of a past I was slowly letting go of. I spent more time with Oliver and Lily, making a real effort to keep things normal for them, even though nothing felt normal to me anymore. We went to the park, had movie nights, and I even tried my hand at cooking their favorite meals. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly present with them. It wasn't easy. Every night, when I tucked them into bed, the guilt crept in, weighing heavily on me for what they were going through. But I knew this was better than the toxic environment Emma and I had created. I tried not to think about Sarah too much, but that was nearly impossible. After everything, she had become a constant in my life in a way I hadn't anticipated. What had started as a plan for revenge had morphed into something deeper, something neither of us had foreseen. She had been my anchor through all of this, and I couldn't ignore how things had intensified between us. But now that the dust was settling, I found myself questioning what would happen next. One afternoon, Sarah and I met up at a cafe, the same place where we had concocted that crazy plan to make Emma jealous. It felt strange being there again, this time with so much unspoken between us. We sat outside, sipping coffee, the awkwardness between us palpable, like a third presence at the table. "I've been thinking," I began, breaking the silence, "about what comes next." Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Yeah," she said softly. "Me too." The truth was, things had gotten complicated, more complicated than I had ever anticipated what started as 35. 20 an escape away to reclaim control over my life had turned into something real, but now that the chaos was over, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. Do you regret it? Sarah asked, suddenly her voice soft but steady. I shook my head. No, I don't regret it. I needed you, Sarah, and I don't think I could have gotten through all this without you. Her expression softened, but there was a tension in her eyes. But I sighed. I don't know if I'm ready for more. Not yet. The words felt heavy as they left my 35. 57 mouth. But they were true. I wasn't ready. My life was a mess, and the last thing I wanted was to drag Sarah deeper into it. I cared about her maybe more than I was willing to admit, but that didn't mean I was ready to start something new. I understand, she said, her voice calm, but laced with sadness. I didn't expect you to have all the answers right now, but I need to know, is this just about you not being ready, or is it something more? I didn't have a good answer for her. Maybe it was a little bit of both. Maybe it was. 36. 30. The guilt I felt about moving on too quickly, or maybe it was because I wasn't sure if what we had was real or just something born out of the chaos. I don't know. I admitted. I need to focus on the kids right now, on rebuilding my life. I don't want to hurt you, Sarah, she nodded, looking down at her cup. I get it. I really do, but I also don't want to be someone's second choice. I don't want to be the woman you turn to just because you need comfort. The truth in her words stump. She was right as much as I wanted. 37. 03. To deny it, there was a part of me that had been using her to fill the void left by Emma, but Sarah deserved better than that. She deserved more than just being part of my revenge, more than being a crutch. While I figured my life out, I care about you, Sarah, I said quietly. I really do, but I think we both know this wasn't built to last. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes, but there was also acceptance. Yeah, she said softly, I think you're right. In the days that followed, I spent a lot of time. 37. 39. Reflecting, I realized that the person I needed to focus on the most right now wasn't Sarah or even Emma. It was me. I needed to rebuild myself, figure out who I was outside of all the mess that my marriage had become, and I needed to be the father that Oliver and Lily deserved, even if that meant putting everything else on hold. I kept in touch with Sarah, but things between us changed. We both knew it couldn't be the same. Not after everything that had happened. We didn't end things in a dramatic way. It wasn't. 38. 11. Like that, it was a quiet mutual understanding that what we'd had was born out of circumstance, not something that could sustain a real relationship. There was a peace in that realization. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't tied down by the weight of my failing marriage or the guilt of the affair. I was free to focus on what mattered, healing and being there for my kids. One evening, as I sat with Oliver and Lily watching a movie they picked out, I realized that this was what 38. 46 mattered. This was where I needed to be. It wasn't about revenge or proving something to Emma anymore. It wasn't even about finding someone new. It was about finding myself, being the kind of father they could rely on, and learning to live with the scars without letting them define me. I didn't know what the future held, but for now that was enough.